One of the things about experience is it's very personal. Experience is a human factor. It happens inside yourself, and it's built from your cultural, your personal, and your historical memory. And so how you experience a thing is individual to yourself. And it's really kind of impossible to design an experience because an experience is a personal thing. But you can build and design all of the elements that make an experience possible. You can create visual language. You can create consistency. You can create clarity. You can create calm. And you can add human to all the aspects of the different ways in which you use words. And when you frame it in that fashion, you can create everything that a human needs to have a good experience. And in that way, you design an experience. And using those primary elements, what you create using information is an experience through that information. This is my own silly definition. You won't find it likely in any book. If you look up information experience design, that will almost certainly be a different definition. But this is the way that I approach it. Also, you don't have to do this alone. In fact, I would argue you shouldn't do this alone. Partnerships have been one of the essential elements of building experiences and connecting stories for us at Atlassian. These partnerships began way early and have taken a long time to ripen and develop. But now they are beginning to bear fruit. And I hope during the rest of this 30 minutes, you'll see how that fruit has begun to grow and what its benefits are to your users and to humans in general. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we became content design. When I joined Atlassian 4 years ago, we were a very traditional tech writing group within the QA organization. And one person challenged us all to turn everything we knew about technical writing upside down, to take all of our toys apart and put them together in different ways. I don't think that what Andrew Prentice had set I don't think that the mission Andrew Prentice gave us ended up being the journey we went on, because I'm pretty sure what he wanted us to do was create repeatable patterns that we could test, verify, and reuse. And so we have done a lot of those things. But that little bit of inspiration flicked a switch within a lot of us at Atlassian. And so we moved from becoming technical writing in a very traditional sense into information experience. Information experience meant that we thought about the whole journey. We began to think more like designers. We began to interact and engage more with designers. We began also to think more like strategists. And then we began to, in order to build a strategy, you have to understand your user. And so we had to begin to think more like researchers. So as all of those things began to come into our domain more effectively, and each of us and the people that we hired, and as our teams grew, we hired for people who had at least an interest or a core in different aspects of content. But I want to be very, very clear. We are writers first, okay? Titles, schmitels, do good work. We are, at the core of us, every single one of us is a technical writer. And I don't ever want to minimize the need or the value of that skill, and neither should you. But be an ANDA. One of the things that I'm constantly telling people, especially people who are new to the tech writing field, is develop an adjunct skill. Be a technical writer. Be clear, be consistent, use white space, use bullets, use formatting, use templates, use clear, consistent language, use all of the very core skills that we have as technical writers. They are the core of human communication. Do not ever lose those. Do not ever underestimate their value. But be an ANDA. Develop a skill. Think like a designer. Act like a strategist. Work like a researcher. When you do these things, you grow your world and your understanding, most principally of your audience. When you think like a designer, you might not ever create a single wireframe. You might not create a single prototype. But if you can understand the user experience design process, if you can understand how they think, how they work, you will be better positioned to add words to that experience that create more success and better experiences for your user. I'm going to say the word experience quite a lot. When you think like a strategist, you think ahead. You understand the business purpose, you understand the user's purpose, and you begin to combine those things and understand not just what specific instructions your user needs, but why they need them and what paths they're following and what success looks like. And then, of course, research is invaluable. Even if you never do a single usability test, understanding how usability testing works, and even more importantly, how to interpret the results, will undeniably make you a better writer in every aspect of the job. Understanding your audience, 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 audience. Understanding humans. Combining these skills along with the core skill of technical writing will allow you to communicate more effectively with all of your users. So what can you do? We did this journey. If you want, I did a talk in 2016 at Write the Docs, and it's called My Atlassian Information Experience Adventure. And if you want to look that up on YouTube, that'll give you the whole history. So I'm not going to go through the whole history, because. But what can you do? I hope that each and every one of you can take something away from this talk. So words matter. Measure how your words matter. Know your value. If you take nothing else away from this talk, know your value. Because in order to start to expand that value and understand it and socialize it and evangelize it to the rest of the company, you need to understand it first and foremost. There are many aspects of your value. The first one we always come to is support ticket reduction, support deflection. That's what tech writing is for. Bullshit. That's a part of what tech writing is for. But it is not just what tech writing is for. We provide value. CTOs in big companies, if you work for software that is enterprise software, CTOs read the documentation. You know why? Because they can trust it. It's not full of marketing. It's not full of garbage. It's just the facts. Well-written, consistent, clear, complete documentation is one of your most effective sales tools. Don't ever let anybody tell you it's not, because that's bullshit. We have done the research. We know. Influence. Every win you get, share that win in whatever form you can. Maybe it's just in a status meeting. Maybe it's just in a stand-up. Maybe it's in a blog. Maybe it depends on the culture of your company. Maybe the best you can do is just say, this documentation got a nice comment, but damn it, share that. Make sure the rest of the company sees your value all the time. Finally, connect. Start with the natural allies. Start with the people that are closest to you and that gain the most value from your work. Like, you may not even recognize how much value your work actually has to the rest of the company. Find out. Talk to people. Talk to people. If you have a sales team, talk to them about how do you use the documentation? How do you use the documentation? This is not to make us become salespeople. Let me say that really quick up front. We are technical communicators. We are documentarians. We are not necessarily marketing people. Some of us are, and that's fine. That's awesome. You can do great work there too. But let's be careful. So I want to talk about one primary element that we use to design experiences at Atlassian, and that is story and narrative. And I want to be very clear here. This is only a single element. Designing an information experience takes cultural sensitivity. It takes understanding word usage. It takes localization. All of these things are factors in creating any information experience. So we don't have 2 hours for me to tell you all about that. So I'm only going to tell you about one. But it's an important one. So story and narrative. At Atlassian, we use story and narrative. Firstly, we use story to inform, direct, and help present our designs. How many people have done a user journey? How many people know what a user journey is? Awesome. So almost everybody. A story is a user journey that's expanded to a beginning and an end. Generally speaking, a user journey starts here, like maybe there's an onboarding journey and you stop there, or maybe there's a this journey and you stop there. A story is a complete end-to-end story. And so we use those journeys to those stories to dive deeper into our users' emotional reactions, their state of mind. We can investigate different personas and personalities more effectively. Because we tell a complete end-to-end story. We might say that Samantha is having a bad day, and she came in and she's just got to learn Jira for the first time, and she's scared, and this is her first job, and her job is dependent on understanding and knowing how Jira works. We have a responsibility to teach Sarah, or Samantha, or whoever, how to use our product effectively. We have an impact on her life. And understanding that through that story will better attach you to how your users interact with both your software and your documentation. And then narrative to connect the experiences. We use narrative structures because they are not as end-to-end. And so a story is about a character. It has a beginning, a middle, an end, an objective, and it creates a complete path. A narrative are structures within that story that can be parts that connect to each other. They create frameworks, but they are not independently dependent on themselves or on the story writ large. They connect to the story, but they can branch off in different directions as your user needs. But the narrative framework as a whole creates consistency for you. So that's where voice and tone and things like that, and the things that other people have talked about so brilliantly today, really, really matter. People will remember information more effectively if you put it into the form of a narrative. I want to be clear about a couple things here, okay? When I say they will take it more effectively in a narrative, like if you just need to know how to clone a repository, please, dear God, don't write an entire story telling how Samantha, like write ABC 1, 2, 3, really good, clear technical documentation. That's fine. But make sure that that little doc that tells you how to clone a repository connects to how to then fill your repository. Then it connects to how to create a pull request. Then it connects to, then it connects to, then it connects to, then it connects to, right? And even if there aren't links, I'm not talking about necessarily learn more links or do this next. Maybe that's the best way to approach it, but every situation is individual and different. But there needs to be an understanding of connection, those narrative frameworks, that structure. Because we are at the center of a lot of stories. We are at the center of a person's story. That person might need to learn something and has no attachment to a product, and maybe your product can do the thing that they need to learn, and maybe it won't. There's the user story from the minute that they first sign on to your product all the way through to every time, and until they abandon it, or they grow or you change or whatever. And then at Atlassian, I've started to recognize that we have some responsibility within our domain for telling stories conceptually, larger concepts, and connecting those stories back into the user experience of our products. So we have the Agile story at Atlassian, of course. And then we have our marketing story about Agile, about our products. That is somewhat of an individual story, but of course it blends in and out of the rest of our stories. And then there's the product story. The product story is the one I always find most tricky because it's really easy to get a little bit too impressed with your own stuff. And so this is like caution. You really do want to engage with the story of your product, but not believe it a little too much yourself. So that's a cautionary tale. Don't try to be something you're not. Don't sell your user on a narrative just because you think it's impressive. I have made this mistake. I wrote an original Git tutorial and I put it together as Teams in Space. And you had to create a repository to fight lasers that were going to, or to create and control lasers that were going to deflect a meteor heading towards Earth. And I had a lot of fun writing it and it was useless. So be careful. Be careful. Remember your user. Don't impress yourself. Okay, it's fun. You can do that on your own. There's Medium, so I'm on Medium. So what can you do? So start by writing a story. It's the easiest place to start. Think about your users. Think about what situations they find themselves in. Think about how they engage with your products on a day-to-day basis and the stresses and the things that happen in their lives using your product. How does that affect them? Where do they find the stumbling blocks? What are the things that cause them pain? Write that story all the way out and understand your user. And then create narrative structures from that. You can do this using short journeys. So maybe you have the onboarding journey. Maybe you have the expertise journey. Maybe there are portions or parts or functions or features within your product that you can tell those little stories, and then begin to connect them. Connect that overall story to the narrative structures that you have, and then connect that to the aspects of content that you have. Blogs, documentation, microcopy, marketing copy, videos, images, etc., etc., etc. Connect everything. Understand where your user is in each part of the journey and through that story. Partnerships and purpose. One of the things that has benefited us the most, one of the reasons that we can create information experiences, is because we've built partnerships. One of the things I always encourage people to do is look for your natural allies. Generally speaking, this is support to start with. There are just so many intercollisions between what we do and what our support partners do. There are so many ways that we can benefit from each other. Nurturing that partnership, to me, is one of the first ways to really break ground and really understand how much impact and value we can have. So as an example of this, in Bitbucket, we have one of the biggest support ticket issues that we have are SSH keys. SSH is an authentication method, for those of you who don't know. And in Mac or Linux, it's pretty straightforward. Generally works pretty. There's some glitches and some things. It's, but in Windows world, I just wanted to write just don't, because SSH keys are kind of a nightmare in Windows a little bit. But you can't do that, And so one of the members of my team, Caitlin Cisick, worked with our support team, did about 6 months worth of in-depth research, watching every single support ticket that came in, measuring how they were effective, measuring how they impacted our product, the time to resolve, looking at and understanding the different ways that people ran into problems. And after that research period, she then went in and rewrote all of our SSH documentation and went back in and published all of that and then measured for another 3 months. And in 3 months' time, we had a 15% reduction in support contact for SSH keys. Our documentation page now gets 37,000 hits a month for SSH keys. And it's become an effective tool to get people onboarded. It's a part of that narrative. It's a part of that story. And we're able to show that value. And yes, it's support deflection, and I just said that, but that's money in the bank for your company. That is one of the easiest first places that you can show real value for the work that you do. And it shows the value of doing the research. So these adjunct things that I'm suggesting you do that you're like, Jesus, when am I ever going to have time to do that? That's ridiculous. I have to write 15 release notes and 2 feature docs, and what are you talking about doing all this extra crap? Pick a small place, pick a small goal and a partner, a small achievable goal that benefits you both. And it might take some extra hours the first time. It might mean you work weekends, and I'm all for work-life balance. If you do it once and you prove your value, I promise you will get a return on that if your company is open to it. Some of our natural allies. Support, I've already talked about. They are probably the most natural of our natural allies. Engineering, though. Surprise! If you show value to your engineers and meaningful work, meaningful value to them, you'll be shocked at the result. I have been shocked at the result. Some of the engineers that I worked with when I started on Bitbucket and I began writing API documentation were kind of like, well, that's effed. Why'd you do that? And I didn't know anything. And they were generally trying to make me better at my job. We were a pretty rough group, and then we're actually very nice now. I'm not kidding. We are actually a nice group now. But the value that I managed to show them was people started building apps onto Bitbucket when our documentation improved. And, we stopped getting your documentation is shit in emails and tweets and. So once we had done that, the engineers were much more willing to work with us. And the other thing, front-end developers, oftentimes will appreciate copy. Sometimes they won't, it's true. And some are really good. So this is another thing I learned. Like, respect the engineer's copy. If it's possible to rewrite it in a way that still makes it the best copy you can write, but uses some of that original content, you will reinforce that engineer's desire to write better. And I have not seen it once. I have seen it at least a dozen times where a front-end engineer is a better writer and tries harder every single time because they want to bypass me once. They want their sentence to be in that UI. And it happens a lot because they are better writers now. So encourage that. Analytics and data. These may not seem like natural allies, but I promise you they are. They want to know just as much about how your users are using your documentation as you do. They want to understand user patterns as much as you do. Man, can you benefit from this? I mean, at a minimum, beg and plead and cry for your company to at least give you access to the full Google Analytics. At least understand who your referrers are, where they're coming from, how they're getting to your documentation, how they're viewing it, how long they're staying on it. GA is actually, it's minimally useful, I think. Like, it's useful, and you can get a lot of good information, but the more you can expand that out, the more you can get data analytics experiments, the more you can get user journeys between the documentation and the UI. The more you can engage with that kind of data, the better you'll understand your user patterns, and the better, it just reinforces and reinforms and reimagines the way that you approach information. And data is a useful tool. It's not the only tool. And finally, growth and marketing. I think at Atlassian, we've probably gotten the most benefit out of this. This is the showiest stuff, right? Like, this is the stuff that I get to show, and you'll see it in a little while. And it's shiny, and it's fun, and I enjoy writing it. But I want to be a little bit cautious here. Don't become marketers, unless you are a marketer. If you are a marketer, awesome. I love you guys. You're amazing. But on persuasion, everything we write, everything, should be technically accurate and complete. And it should always, always be in support of the user's best interest and of their journey. It should always create for them a better experience. Don't destroy trust. Your documentation is your best ally. I can't emphasize this enough. Do not let the marketers bend your documentation to their will. Do not do it. Fight them every step of the way. Now, having said that, connect to them. Understand what they're doing, what their purpose is, how they're talking about your products. Understand what terminology they're using. Understand how they're approaching it. Understand what markets they're working in, and how that matters to you and your team, and how you can support that journey. And then find ways where there's collaboration that can happen. It's amazing what you can do together, I promise you. You will get great benefit out of this. Even if you never write a single marketing blog, even if you never create a markety kind of tutorial or a fancy video, even if you don't do any of these things, you will get great value. You will understand better the mental situation that your user is in the minute that they arrive on your product. Right? Because you'll understand what their expectations are before they get there. So don't destroy trust. And the experiences that we design, they have to inform the user's journey. I believe there are 3 principal ways that they have to do this. First, functionally. Always, always, always first functionally. Okay? All documentation, all information should support the user's journey to success. Again, this is don't write to be fancy, don't write to impress yourself, write for the user's journey, write for their experience, write for their success. First and foremost, make sure that they can achieve the thing that they're there to achieve. Perceptively, this is tricky. This is the hardest thing to nail. There are 1 or 2 places in the UI and 1 or 2 places in the documentation where I think we've really nailed this. I don't actually have a good example right now, but if you can create a perception within your user's mind that this is what's coming and that they'll be successful, they will win. So I'm going to walk you through a story. We're going to talk about the person story to the user story when it comes to Git. So from concept to tutorial to adoption to user acceptance. So let's start. Searching for Git. What is Git? So this is the person story. We haven't even got a user yet. They're just a person looking for Git. So we worked with our marketing partners, and they had already developed the Getting Git Right site, but we worked with them to take this original content, which was just focused on the concept of Git, and then add this little touch here, ready to learn Git. You can try this interactive tutorial. It's a user-driven choice, and it doesn't interfere with their action. Learn Bit, and then then you're into the tutorial itself, and you're a user. You're engaged. You've downloaded Bitbucket, or not downloaded. You've logged into Bitbucket, and you've started using it. And then we support that throughout the entire user journey. We reinforce it within the UI and interactions within the UI. We offer multiple opportunities through narrative structures to create information experiences and allow that user to make choices based on their need. And then, once we get there, we offer multiple paths. We offer multiple paths to different, this is where the narrative even expands further. Because maybe they want to use source tree, maybe they don't want to use the command line. And we inform them all along the way at different, very specific points based on user research. And then finally, documentation matters. Because you don't need a giant marketing tutorial to know how to clone a repository. But also, offer different experiences. Offer different ways to ingest that information. And finally, add some human when and wherever you possibly can. Cover the entire journey. Start from the person, go all the way through the advocate, and then through the adopter, and then through the expert. What can you do? Just start somewhere, anywhere. Anything you can do. Build evidence, do research, whatever it takes. Research. Talk to your users and people any way you can. Take every chance you have to do user research. Take every chance you have to understand your audience. Spotlight every success, but acknowledge every challenge. Make sure that you're telling the truth to your people so that they trust you. And that the value, when you go and you say, like, we've got value for this, they know that you're not bullshitting. You're not there to get more money or more people. You're there because you want to create a better damn experience for your user. Believe in your mission, no matter how silly it seems. All of this can come together in ways you have no idea or no expectation of. And then one last thing, just because I'm me. Please, every chance you get, make human happen. Technology is what people use for their jobs. Their lives often depend on it. Make it human. Reduce their stress. Add a little touch, because you are the human voice of technology. You have a duty and a responsibility, in my opinion, to be human and to make the world a better place. Thank you.